Pain came first, sharp and endless, before I even understood I was alive. My arm was gone. I knew that before I opened my eyes, because the space where it should have been felt wrong, hollow, like a missing tooth but 1,000 times worse. My ears were ringing so loud I could barely hear my own breath. The last thing I remembered was the mining rig shaking apart around me, metal screaming, and Daniel's voice on the comm cutting off in the middle of a word. I forced my eyes open. The room was not human. The walls curved instead of meeting at corners, glowing faintly blue, and the air smelled like burnt metal mixed with something sweet, almost like flowers. A tall figure stood near my bed, its body covered in a smooth gray coat, its joints bending in places joints should not bend. Two smaller figures moved beside it, their hands quick and careful as they checked tubes running into my remaining arm. I tried to speak, but only a dry croak came out. "Do not move," the tall one said. Its voice was calm, almost gentle, though it did not sound quite human. "Your body is still healing. You lost a great deal." "Where am I?" I finally managed. "You are aboard a Vral medical vessel," it said. "My name is Kessa. I am the lead physician here. You were pulled from the wreckage of your mining transport 6 hours ago." The memories crashed back all at once. The rig, the explosion in the lower deck, Daniel screaming for everyone to get to the escape pods, Grace pulling me toward the exit before the ceiling came down between us. "The others," I said, my throat tightening. "Where are the others?" Kessa did not answer right away. The two smaller figures beside her paused what they were doing, and for a moment the only sound was the quiet hum of machines. "You were the only one recovered alive," Kessa said finally. I felt something cold settle in my chest, heavier than any pain in my arm. 12 of us had been on that rig. 12 people who ate together, argued together, complained about the company together. Now it was just me. "You could have left me," I said, my voice breaking. "It would have been faster, easier. Why did you even come out this far for one damaged mining ship?" The room went quiet again, but this time it felt different. Kessa exchanged a glance with the two smaller figures, and one of them, a nurse with a soft voice, stepped closer to my bed. "That is exactly what we need to explain to you," she said, "because the answer is not simple, and it is not something we tell just anyone." I stared at her, confused, pain still pulsing through what remained of my arm. "What do you mean?" The nurse looked at Kessa, as if asking permission. Kessa gave a small nod. "My name is Rilan," the nurse said. "I have served on rescue ships for 11 years. In all that time, I have never seen a captain divert a full warship for a distress signal as small as yours." "A warship?" I repeated. "For a mining rig?" "For a human mining rig," Rilan said, and there was something strange in her voice, almost like awe. "Do you understand what that means out here?" I shook my head slowly, wincing at the effort. 3 years ago," Rilan continued, "there was an attack at a joint colony called Kellinar Reach. Vral families lived there, Ocelon families lived there, and a small group of human researchers, no more than 40, working on some kind of long-range communication project. I had never heard of it. I had been buried in ice mining contracts for years, 3 systems away from any real news. A Threshtak invasion fleet arrived without warning," Kessa said, stepping in. 11 warships. The colony had almost no defenses. Standard procedure in such situations is simple. You evacuate what you can and abandon the rest. No commander would waste resources trying to save an outpost that could not be saved. But the humans there did not accept that, Rilan said. They had 6 mining lasers repurposed as weapons. No shields worth mentioning, no real training for combat, and they used everything they had to protect an evacuation route so the Ocelon children could escape on a transport ship. I lay there, absorbing this, the pain in my arm suddenly feeling very small compared to what I was hearing. "They held that position for 11 hours, Kessa said quietly, "against a fleet that could have destroyed a moon. They should not have lasted the first hour, yet they held until every single child was clear." "What happened to them?" I asked, though part of me already feared the answer. "Most did not survive," Rilan said gently. "But the ones who did, and the recordings recovered afterward, changed how every species in this part of space thinks about your kind." I did not know what to say. I thought about Daniel, about Grace, about the twins who called each other siblings even though they weren't related by blood. None of them had ever mentioned anything like this. To them it was probably just another story from a war they were too far away to know much about. "The Threshtak commander at Kellinar Reach filed a report afterward," Kessa said. "We recovered a copy of it much later. He described the resistance as, in his words, unreasonable and without any strategic value. He could not understand why anyone would fight so hard for a position with no chance of victory." That phrase spread everywhere. Rilan added. Unreasonable resistance without strategic value. It became something people repeat now, across many species, when they talk about humans, not as an insult, as a kind of warning, and also as a kind of respect. I felt my eyes sting, and I blinked hard, trying not to let it show. So when a distress signal appears anywhere in this sector, Kessa said, and it comes from a human vessel, no matter how small, no matter how far away, command does not calculate whether it is worth the fuel or the time. They simply respond, because everyone remembers what happens when humans decide something matters enough to fight for, even when the numbers say they should not bother. I thought about my crew, 12 people, drilling ice on a forgotten rock, 3 systems from anywhere important. None of us ever thought anyone would notice if something went wrong out there. We were replaceable equipment operators as far as the company was concerned. You sent a warship, I said slowly. For 12 people nobody else would have bothered to look for. We sent a warship, Kessa confirmed, because that is what your people taught us to expect from each other. Sacrifice earns sacrifice. That is the debt we now carry, whether any of you asked for it or not. Rilan reached out, her fingers resting gently on the blanket near my remaining arm, careful not to touch the skin directly. You lost people today, she said softly. 11 lives, gone in an instant. I am deeply sorry for that loss, more than words can properly explain. But please understand this. You did not lose them to indifference. Nobody decided your crew was not worth saving. We came as quickly as our engines could carry us, because that is what is owed now, every single time. I closed my eyes, picturing Daniel's easy laugh, Grace's stubborn insistence on double-checking every safety line, the twins arguing over whose turn it was to cook dinner in the cramped little galley. They had no idea any of this existed. They just worked, and lived, and never once thought someone far away would consider their lives worth this kind of response. They were wrong about that. Someone was always going to come. Rest now, Kessa said, straightening up. Your arm will take time to heal properly. We have already started the regrowth process, though it will be slow and difficult. Wait, I said, before she could turn away completely. You said I was the only one recovered. Does that mean there is nothing left of the ship? Nothing at all? Kessa paused. There is something you should know, though I did not want to overwhelm you all at once. My chest tightened again. Tell me. Before the final collapse of your ship's structure, she said, one escape pod launched. It did not reach us before the wreckage field became too dangerous for our sensors to track clearly. Hope, sharp and sudden, cut through the numbness in my chest. Someone else made it out? We do not know for certain, Kessa admitted. The pod's beacon activated briefly, then went silent. It could mean the beacon simply failed. It could mean something worse. We have a search team continuing to scan the debris field even now, but conditions out there are unstable. How many people fit in one pod? I asked, my voice rising despite the pain it caused in my chest. 2, perhaps 3, depending on how it was loaded, Rilan said. 2 or 3, out of 11 unaccounted for. It was such a small number, and yet it felt like the entire universe depending on it. Please, I said, gripping the blanket with my remaining hand, please keep looking. Whoever is in that pod, they matter. They matter just as much as anyone. We intend to, Kessa said. That is precisely the point I was trying to explain to you. We do not give up on searches simply because the odds look poor. Not anymore, not since Kellinar Reach. For the next 2 days I drifted in and out of sleep, my body slowly adjusting to the new tissue growing where my arm used to end. Rilan checked on me constantly, and slowly I learned more about her, about the crew, about the ship itself. It was called the Wandering Light, a name that felt strange at first but grew on me the longer I stayed aboard. On the 3rd day, I was finally strong enough to sit up without help. Rilan brought me something that resembled soup, though the taste was unlike anything from home. Slightly bitter, slightly sweet, oddly comforting despite being completely foreign. Any news on the pod? I asked, as I had asked every single day since waking. Rilan's expression, if her face could even be called an expression by human standards, seemed to shift slightly. Something I had learned meant she was about to share something important. Our search team located the pod 6 hours ago, she said. It had drifted much farther than expected, caught in a debris current none of our instruments predicted correctly. My spoon froze halfway to my mouth. And? There were 2 survivors inside, she said. I nearly dropped the bowl entirely. Who? Do you know their names? The pod's internal records identified them as Grace Whitfield and a younger crew member named Owen Blake, Rilan said. Both were in poor condition, but stable. They are currently being treated in a different section of this ship. Grace had made it. And Owen, the newest hire on our crew, barely out of training, someone Daniel had personally taken under his wing. Tears blurred my vision before I could stop them. I did not try to hide them this time. Can I see them? I asked. Not yet, Rilan said gently. They need time, just as you did. But soon, when everyone is stable enough, I promise you will be reunited. Over the following days, I learned more details, piece by piece, about how Grace and Owen had survived. Grace had been the one to physically drag Owen into the escape pod during the final collapse, sealing the hatch seconds before a support beam crashed down exactly where they had been standing. The pod's engines had malfunctioned almost immediately, sending them drifting blind through the debris field for nearly 2 full days before rescue arrived. When I finally saw Grace in person, nearly a week after waking up myself, she looked exhausted, thinner than I remembered, but very much alive. The moment she saw me, she crossed the small medical room in a few unsteady steps and wrapped her arms around me, careful of my still healing shoulder. I thought you were gone, she whispered. They told me only one other survivor was pulled from the main wreckage. I did not even dare hope it was you. I thought the same about you, I admitted, my voice thick with emotion I could no longer control. Owen sat quietly nearby, looking younger and more fragile than I remembered, though his eyes lit up when he saw me. Did they tell you, he said, his voice still a little shaky, about why this ship even came looking for us in the first place? I nodded slowly. About Kellinar Reach. About the reputation we apparently have now, whether we ever asked for it or not. Grace pulled back slightly, studying my face. I heard some of it too, from one of the medical staff here. It is strange, isn't it? All this time, working out on that frozen rock, thinking nobody in the wider universe even knew we existed. And yet everyone knew, Owen added, or at least, everyone who mattered when it counted. Over the following weeks, as my arm continued its slow healing process, I spent hours talking with Kessa, with Rilan, and with several other members of the crew aboard the Wandering Light. I learned that this ship had responded to 11 separate human distress signals in the past year alone, each one deemed by strict military logic to be low priority, low value, hardly worth the resources required for a proper rescue attempt. Every single time, they had gone anyway. It is not just this ship, Kessa explained to me one evening, as I sat by a viewport looking out at the endless stars. Nearly every Allied fleet operating in this region now follows similar unofficial guidance. Human distress calls receive immediate priority, regardless of apparent value or risk involved. Because of one battle, I said quietly. Because of what happened at Kellinar Reach. Because of what your entire species proved that day, Kessa corrected gently. That value is not always measured correctly by strict calculation. Sometimes the willingness to sacrifice everything for something that seems impossible carries a weight numbers simply cannot capture. I thought about the 11 crew members we had lost on that rig, people whose names would likely never appear in any official history, whose sacrifice would never be discussed the way Kellinar Reach was discussed. And yet, in a strange, quiet way, their loss had still mattered enough that a warship had crossed 3 entire systems just to search for survivors among the wreckage. By the time my arm had fully healed, weeks later, stronger even than it had been before the accident thanks to whatever advanced process the Vral medical team had used, I found myself standing before a small memorial wall aboard the Wandering Light. It was something I had not expected to find on a vessel belonging to another species entirely, yet there it was, a section dedicated entirely to names, dates, and short descriptions of every human crew lost during rescue operations this particular ship had responded to over the years. Rilan found me there, staring quietly at the newly added names representing my own lost crewmates. "We add every name we recover," she said softly, standing beside me, "even when we cannot bring the person home. Even when all that remains is a name and a date, it matters that they are remembered properly." "Why go through all this trouble?" I asked, though by now I understood the answer far better than I had that first confused day waking up in the medical bay. "We are not your people. We are barely allies, still learning to work alongside each other after everything that happened. Because respect, once earned properly, deserves to be honored properly," Rilan said. "Your people taught an entire region of space something important about what determination truly means. The least any of us can do in return is make certain no human life is ever treated as simply expendable again, not while ships like this one are still capable of answering the call." Standing there, surrounded by names of strangers from other rescues, alongside the names of my own lost friends, I finally understood something that had been building inside me ever since I first woke up in that strange, ozone-scented medical bay. We had never set out to become symbols of anything. We had simply been ordinary people, doing difficult work far from home, trying to survive another day on a frozen, forgotten rock. Yet somewhere along the way, without any of us realizing it, something we had done, something entire crews like mine had done without ever knowing anyone was watching, had changed how an entire region of the galaxy viewed human life. Grace and Owen eventually joined me at the memorial wall, both fully recovered now, both ready to begin whatever came next for us. None of us spoke for a long moment, simply looking at the names of the friends we had lost. Friends who would never know the full truth of what their final hours had meant to people they had never even met. "Do you think they would be surprised?" Owen finally asked. "Knowing all this? Knowing why the rescue happened the way it did?" "Daniel would probably just laugh about it," Grace said, a small, sad smile crossing her face. "He never thought much of himself as anything special. Just a guy trying to do his job properly." "Maybe that is exactly the point," I said quietly. "None of them were trying to prove anything to anyone. They were just trying to do right by each other, right up until the very end. Maybe that is exactly why it matters so much to everyone else watching." As the wandering light continued its journey back toward the nearest human settlement, carrying the three of us home along with the memory of everyone we had lost, I found myself thinking less about the arm I had sacrificed, and more about the strange, unexpected legacy an entire species had built without ever meaning to build anything at all. We had simply been humans, doing what humans do, refusing to give up on each other even when giving up would have been so much easier. And somewhere out among the stars, that simple truth had been enough to change everything.